securities regulators, nor is it an indication that the advisor has attained a particular level of skill or ability.
Okay, disclaimer is up. We'll be up in 45 seconds.
In jurisdictions in which the firm and its representatives are appropriately registered or exempt from registration. You should not assume that any discussion or information contained in this broadcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from the advisor. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and there can be no assurance that the future performance of any specific investment strategy, or product, or any non-investment related content made reference to directly or indirectly in this broadcast will be profitable, equal any corresponding indicated historical performance level or levels, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. Past performance is not indicative of future result. Investment advisory services offered through Wealth Quarterback LLC. Tired of losing money in the stock market roller coaster? Frustrated with the government taxing you into oblivion? Worried about inflation? How do you prepare for so many financial uncertainties? Welcome to the show that will help you develop your game plan. The Financial Quarterback with Josh Jalinski. Josh is a noted financial advisor and president of the Jalinski Advisory Group, and he's here to answer your questions. Call into the show at 800-321-0710. 800-321-0710. Now, let's kick off your financial future. Here's Josh Jalinski.
Hi, everybody. This is Josh Jalinski, the Financial Quarterback, coming to you live. And we have special guest David McKnight, author, speaker, and financial strategist, joining us to discuss the new Trump tax plan. The new Biden tax plan, and the repeal of the Trump tax codes and what that means for your money. So, David, for those who've not heard about you or read your books, The Power of Xero, the volatility, is it the volatility buffer or the volatility shield?
Volatility shield.
Describe, and then you have a latest book as well. So share with our listeners your background.
Yes, I've, much like you, Josh, I've been in the financial services industry for about 23 years. And 2014, I wrote a book called The Power of Xero, threw it out on Amazon, crossed my fingers, and it just started to sell like crazy, and later spawned a documentary by the same name, and follow-up books. As you mentioned, Look Before You Leap, Volatility Shield, Tax-Free Income for Life through Penguin Random House. And I think we've got a message that's really resonating with Americans, this idea that tax rates in the future likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. Therefore, we need to sort of reevaluate how we're accumulating dollars for retirement in light of this likelihood that taxes down the road are likely to be much higher than they are today.
So what is the latest update? It seems like they changed the Biden, whatever it's called, infrastructure plan. They change it every day. What is the latest update? What's the latest you've read, and has it passed?
Yeah, so
and what's going on with it?
Pardon me. You really have to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of this thing almost hour by hour, because the conditions on the ground are just changing very, very rapidly. It's a very fluid situation. Last I heard, Joe Manchin, of course, was not interested in the $6 trillion price tag proposed by Bernie Sanders, or the $3.5 trillion price tag proposed by the rest of Congress. He's much more comfortable with a $1.5 to $1.75 trillion package. The question, of course, becomes how are they going to pay for it? And while Joe Manchin is not opposed to increasing tax rates on the top 1%, those making $450,000 or more per year. Kristen Sinema is. She has expressed pretty strong resistance to raising tax rates, even on billionaires. And so they floated this idea that they would tax the unrealized capital gains of billionaires. And she didn't even like that. And so really it's sort of been mired down in a bunch of infighting among Democrats, and it's just not a very cohesive caucus. And so we're now at the point where they had proposed having everybody vote on the legislation before it was even written, because they wanted Joe Biden to have a victory before he went to Rome, so that he could sort of trumpet this idea that the U.S. has democracy figured out, and he wanted some climate things worked in there as well, so he could be a good example to the rest of the world. But he wasn't even able to get that. So he addressed, the Democratic caucus and said, look, I'd really like to have something figured out before I land in Rome. And of course, they were able to come out with the latest, writing of the legislation. But we still don't know. It's very much, like I said, in flux. We still don't know how Kristen Sinema is thinking about this. We don't know. Joe Manchin refuses to make any comments on it. And so even though they might tell you that they're very much moving in the same direction and they have a lot of optimism, I don't think until we know exactly what Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema think about all of this legislation, they're really sort of dead in the water. And certainly raising tax rates on the top 1% seems to be off the table. And so the real question in my mind becomes, what's going to happen to tax rates for the rest of us? Are they just going to expire in 2026, like with the sunset of the Trump tax cuts, or are there going to be an extension of these tax cuts? Really hard to say at this point.
Well, depends who wins, I guess, in 2024 and 2022. November of 2021, we have the Virginia gubernatorial race, as well as the New York, which seem to indicate potentially a Republican takeover of the House and potentially Senate in 2022, although the Republicans always seem to snatch victory from whatever the phrase is. They do the opposite. Yeah. They pick the worst candidates, that have no enthusiasm typically. I mean, well, Trump was an exception on the enthusiasm. But so what? So do you think we're just going to keep the Trump tax code until 2026?
That's a big question, Mark. I have said on social media and on my blogs and on my podcast that my hunch on this is that they're not going to be able to really get anything through. Here's the funny thing, Josh, is that if Joe Biden wants to raise taxes on the top 1%, those making more than $450,000, the quickest way for him to do that is to actually just let the Trump tax cuts expire in 2026, because they will revert back to 39.6 for the wealthiest Americans. Kristen Sinema, like I said, has expressed opposition to raising tax rates on the top 1%. And so I don't believe that without her blessing, they're going to be able to raise taxes on those wealthy individuals with this new legislation. And so I think that the fastest way for Joe Biden to get that additional revenue is simply to let the current tax cut expire. And if that's the case, then what we're looking at for mainstream America is those who fall within that 22 or 24% tax bracket. What you're looking at is if you include this year, and we're really getting down to the wire, if you want to start shifting money from tax deferred to tax free, you probably should get the ball rolling before December, because a lot of custodians don't love being pressured towards the end of the year to do Roth conversion. So if you wanted to take advantage of the 5 years left before tax rates go up for good, you should definitely start thinking about getting things moving within the next month, because if you don't take advantage of the 2021 tax year, now you have 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, which is only 4 years. And the shorter the period within which you're shifting money from tax deferred to tax free, the more likely you are to rise into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn. And so this is whatever happens in the next week, I think, is going to determine how people plan for retirement in a pretty significant way. And it's also going to determine the legacy of the Joe Biden presidency.
So what do we do? What do we do with our monies? You mentioned taking advantage of the lower Trump tax codes with potentially Roths. But I get some people say, Josh, Roths and some of these other tax-free things, why couldn't Congress just change that? Do you get that question a lot? Especially in light of the death of the stretch IRA and the Secure Act that passed, which I do want to get your take on that when we return from the break. But what's going on? How do you answer that? Congress can change the laws again. Why should I do any planning now?
Yeah, there's two ways that I typically respond to that. Historically, the IRS has said, look, we're either going to tax you on the seed or tax you on the harvest. If we tax you on the seed, that's tantamount to paying tax on your contributions, put it into a Roth IRA, and then it grows tax-free. You take it out tax-free. Being taxed on the harvest means you get the deduction on the front end, you let it grow tax-deferred, and you pay tax on the back end, which to me, in my mind, doesn't make a lot of sense if you believe, as I do, that we're in a rising tax rate environment. So they've always either taxed you on the seed or on the harvest. If they were to come out all of a sudden and say, we're going to tax you both on the seed and on the harvest, I think that you'd see chaos. I think people that are making important retirement decisions that said, hey, look, we were relying on, the law that you put into effect to make these types of decisions. And now you're changing the framework of the law mid-stride. Therefore, this is going to have a deleterious impact on my retirement. But the second thing that we have to always remember, Josh, is that the Roth IRA is the one thing that the federal government and the American public actually both like. I mean, there's not a lot of things in the world, Josh, where the federal government likes it and Americans like it. The Roth IRA is one of those things. Why? Because the Roth IRA, you're using after-tax dollars. It brings more money into the IRS coffers today, which is what they're looking for. But it also, we love it, the American public likes it, because in the face of potentially rising tax rates, we can shield ourselves. We can protect ourselves by paying taxes at today's historically low tax rates, so that when tax rates are likely to be dramatically higher down the road, we've done all the heavy lifting, and we then take that money out tax-free. And so I don't see these programs going anywhere. If anything, I see the federal government continuing to make the Roth IRA even more attractive. For example, Roth 401k plan is to increase the amount of money you can put into a Roth 401k from, if you're over age 50, from $26,000 per year to $27,000 per year. So I don't see that going anywhere soon. But, Josh, at the rate Congress keeps changing their mind, and if this recent legislation is any indication, we have no idea what Congress is going to do. I mean, my head is spinning just from all the back and forth just in the last week on this Biden legislation alone.
Well, maybe they'll do nothing. People always say they want bipartisan compromise. I always say I don't want them to do anything and screw up my life even more. So,
right.
David
you
McKnight. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you would have to likely come up with a revised version of your book. I'd have to do the same here. So I love status quo.
Yeah, we'll have a lot to do. Tax-free income for life, a step-by-step plan for a secure retirement. That's David's latest book. He is the best-selling author of Power of Xero, became quite a phenomenon. So, folks, if you want that book, we'll give it to you free, 888-988-JOSH, or you could go to davidmcknight.com and get the Tax-Free Income for Life book. We'll talk about how to get tax-free income for life. We'll also talk about how to protect yourself from the rising ravages of inflation. Everybody's worried about inflation. And then I want to ask David, what is his take? Does he think we are headed towards deflation or inflation, kind of the age-old debate in financial circles? When we return, this is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight of the Power of Xero and Tax-Free Income for Life. Also, my friend Howard's favorite book. He loves your novella, The Volatility Shield, How to Vanquish the 4% Rule and Maximize Your Retirement Income. David is a prolific author. I feel like he writes a book every year. We're going to I think he's writing a new book as well, so we'll get his take on that. When we return, this is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial.
It's always on your mind. Retirement, whether you're 55 or 35. Not everyone wants to work forever, and most would like a comfortable retirement. You may already have a plan, but is it the right one? Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program, is ready to guide you towards financial freedom. He challenges the ways your parents and grandparents saved money with fresh strategies, which are exactly what you need to navigate today's volatile economic climate. Josh's new book, Retirement Reality Check, is available to order on Amazon. It's an easy read that guides you through his system for securing your financial freedom, including tax-saving strategies, understanding the right investment mix, and more. Order now Retirement Reality Check. Call Josh at 888-988-JOSH. Let Josh help you map out your retirement using fresh strategies. Call 888-988-5674. That's 888-988-5674.
Hey, meet you out on the first tee?
Yeah, I'll be right there. Just reading this article.
On what?
New bill Congress passed. Looks like it's going to affect the value of all retirement savings plans. My financial guy didn't tell me about this when I saw him the other day.
Well, my guy did, and we made a plan. You may have heard of him, Josh Jalinski.
Josh Jalinski is your guy?
Listen, if you're 10 years or less from retirement,
Which I am,
Josh will give you a free economic plan, which includes retirement planning, a 27-point checklist to make sure your income lasts as long as you live. He'll even help you navigate the current tax code.
I'm definitely going to call Josh.
Cool, but first, can we play some golf?
Call Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program, for your free economic plan. 888-988-JOSH. 888-988-JOSH. 888-988-JOSH.
This is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight. So, David, before we get to some of your books, which are exceptional, any new research? What are you doing now?
Right now I'm writing, actually, you mentioned I had written this financial novella. It's about 100 pages, Volatility Shield. And it's not unusual for people to tell me, hey, look, of all the books that you've written, that's actually my favorite because it's got a sort of a heartwarming story and a lot of twists and, the M. Night Shyamalan twists and turns, which, the twist endings that people love. But it also couches a financial principle that's very, very important. I'm actually writing a full-blown novel. It's called the Infinity Code, which has a financial theme, financial principles that are embedded in it. But what it really does is it strikes at the heart of what I think is a potential scourge for America. And I know that you likely feel the same way. It has to do with modern monetary theory, this idea that you can simply print your way out of your problems, that you can, I've said in podcasts and maybe even on the show before that there's a fiscal gap in our country of $239 trillion. What does that mean? That means that we have promised so much for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt. These are non-discretionary items. We have no control over them. We're bound by law to pay for them. And we have so overpromised on those four things that we would have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today, earning treasury rates, just to be able to deliver on all these promises. How much do we actually have? We have Zippo, right? So modern monetary theory says, don't worry about all that debt. Because we denominate debt in our own currency, we can simply just print more money to be able to pay for all of these unfunded obligations. And if to the extent that printing all that money grows the pie for everybody, then it's perfectly okay. And every economist that I've ever interviewed, be it David Walker, former Comptroller General of the federal government, Dr. Larry Kotlikoff, foremost expert in the nation on what we call fiscal gap accounting out of Boston University, Maya McGinnis, who's the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, they all have sounded the warning cry to me. They said, Dave, if we resort to modern monetary theory to solve our financial problems, we are going to experience hyperinflation, the likes of which we haven't seen since Germany post-World War II. And so I think that's a huge threat to our republic. And I have created a very much a Dan Brown type suspense mystery thriller. Couched within is this idea that modern monetary theory is a threat to our republic. So I imagine that'll come out in the next couple of months. So keep your ear to the ground on that.
That's exciting. The Infinity Code. It's like the Da Vinci Code or something. That's exciting.
Well, infinity refers to, there's actually Stephanie Kelton, who ironically shares the same literary agent as I do, is the foremost advocate of modern monetary theory. She's written a book called The Deficit Myth. And she, in her book, talks about our ability to print money as the infinity bucket. So, in other words, we can print an infinite amount of money to pay for all of the social programs that, we've always sought after, be it, universal health care, free college tuition for everybody, a guaranteed minimum wage of $15 an hour. We can do it all, and all we have to do is just print the money because we denominate debt in our own currency, and we always have the ability to pay that debt back with no deleterious influences at all. And every economist, like I said, I've ever interviewed says, whatever you do, do not do that. And so the problem is it's gaining more and more currency. There are even politicians that are starting to talk about this as a viable way of funding all of these national initiatives. And I think that unless we get out ahead of it and raise the warning cry, that we're going to, send our country into this catastrophic death spiral from which we may not recover. And so the book talks a lot about all of that, but it has a really cool plot that ushers you through all of the consequences of this like I said, like in a Dan Brown sort of a way.
Are we going there already? I mean, I just couldn't help but think Social Security got a COLA. What was it? 5.8%, 6%, something like that. And then the very next day I saw McDonald's raises rates 6%. And then you go to the grocery store and inflation is not just 3% or even 6%. It's like 30%. You have 30% less of whatever bag you buy. If you buy a bag of, I like these quinoa tortilla chips, and literally it's like this much of the bag. It's now like 1/8 of the bag. It used to be 1/2 of the bag. Now it's 1/8. So they're playing all these games. Or the dollar bread, even the dollar bread, the cheapo dollar bread is now $1.30. And then I know you have a bunch of kids. How many kids you have? I have 7. You have nice.
I have 7. It's not very often that you get two guys on the radio with 7 kids. So 14 between the two. But hey, I tell people someone's got to keep Social Security solvent because it's not the rest of America. It's you
they
and I
should be giving us money. We should be getting the stimulus plan. So that's
right.
That's great. I want to get your tips on being a father of 7. It's a lot of fun, a lot of work, very tiring. But as far as so we bought one of these mega vans, the Nissan, those big 12, 15 passenger vans, kind of like a church van. It was $40,000 7 months ago. Do you know what they go for now?
I'm going to say 55.
69.5. Insane. And the same with, and then people say, supply chain. Well, I'm sure it's some of the supply chain, but it's also the fact that when you have excess money lying around, people start raising their prices to keep up with the labor demand, the higher wages that employers are having to pay. We are just beginning to see the tip of inflation. There was a little debate on Twitter. There's various people. Jack Dorsey says we're going to inflation. Kathy Wood says no deflation. Where are you on that? I say inflation, then deflation. But what do you think?
Yeah, there's no question inflation, but the question is to what extent. I feel like that the modern monetary theorists, whenever we do have inflation, they always have some explanation for why it's not their fault. Because really, we've been engaged in modern monetary theory for the last 20 years. I mean, we've been printing money like it's going out of style. The supply of U.S. dollars in circulation has risen dramatically, which is not the end of the world if the economy is keeping pace of it. Like I said, if it grows the pie for everybody, that's not the end of the world. The problem is when we start printing, and really the larger picture here, Josh, is we're going to get to the point where when interest rates, if and when they do go back up, the cost of servicing all this debt is going to triple, quadruple. If all they did was go back to what they were historically normal rates that they were in, say, 2003, the cost of servicing the national debt would triple or quadruple and would consume the entire federal budget. And so that's an issue. And so a lot of people say, well, because we denominate debt in U.S. currency, we can simply print more money to be able to service that debt, because heaven forbid we raise more revenue, cut spending, or some combination of the two, and sort of get our financial house in order. My fear is that we are going to start leaning more and more on printing more money. And as Alan Auerbach from Berkeley, Dr. Alan Auerbach from Berkeley in California said in our movie, The Power of Xero, he says, the problem with trying to print your way out of these problems is debt is being driven primarily by Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and all of which are tied to inflation by law. So the more money you print, the more inflation goes up, the more the cost of these programs increases commensurately. So it's like a dog chasing its tail. You print more money, the cost of the program goes up, and you never really have enough money to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unless you start raising taxes dramatically. And that's what I, of course, talk about in my book. Will we see inflation? Yes, but I think that eventually we're just going to have to either dramatically increase revenue, dramatically reduce our expenses, some combination of the two to keep our ship of state afloat.
David McKnight, the book Tax-Free Income for Life. If there was a book, I guess all of your books are like children. Tax-Free Income for Life, that's your latest financial book, correct?
That's correct.
And you lay out a step-by-step plan for a more secure retirement, and you talk about getting tax-free income for life. Before we go into the break, give us a little teaser before we come back as we talk about tax-free income.
Well, in Power of Xero, I talk about how to shield yourself from rising taxes. But what I didn't really address is really the number one concern that America, that pre-retirees have, is this idea that, hey, I don't want to run out of money before I run out of life. And so what I do in this new book is I marry this idea of protecting yourself from higher taxes and making sure you don't run out of money before you reach life expectancy. I marry those two topics and talk about how you can cover or mitigate both of those risks within the very same financial plan.
Wonderful. And folks, you can go to davidmcknight.com, buy the book, or call us at 888-988-JOSH, and we'll give you a copy free when you schedule and keep your no obligation review. Just call us at 888-988-5674. That's 888-988-JOSH. When we return, we'll talk about how to get tax-free income for life. This is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial.
Are you worried about the recent coronavirus crisis and how it may have affected your money? Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback, inviting you to join me for my complimentary 6 Ways to Keep Calm During Turbulent Markets webinar. If you schedule and keep your no-obligation webinar today at 888-988-JOSH. It's a great thing to do if you're stuck at home under stay-at-home orders. Call us right now, 888-988-JOSH. If you're bored, there's never been a better time to get a second opinion on your wealth than right now. 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674. And go to my website, retirementrealitycheck.com today and take your free investment profile quiz. And when you buy my book, you're eligible for 3 free gifts. 888-988-JOSH.
Call Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program. 888-988-JOSH.
So we're talking about tax-free income for life. First, so how do we get it? How do we get tax-free income for life? I want to know.
Well, so there's a number of different ways to mitigate what we call longevity risk. And longevity risk, like I said, is the risk of running out of money before you die. And that's really, as much as I hate to admit it, I'd like to think, hey, rising tax rates is a number one risk people are worried about. It's a close second, but what people are primarily worried about is they just don't want to die broke. They want to sort of bounce the check to the undertaker. So the question is, how do you most efficiently and effectively remove longevity risk from your retirement program, from your retirement plan? And one of the ways historically that we've done this, and you and I have talked about this over the radio before, is by what's called the 4% rule, which is some economists have downgraded to the 3% rule. Let's just call it the 3% rule. 3% rule says that you can never take more than 3% out of your stock market portfolio adjusted for inflation in any given year to have a reasonably realistic likelihood of not running out of money before you die. And they've done a lot of Monte Carlo studies over the years, and they basically said that, hey, you got a 60-40 bond, a stock bond split, and you never take more than the 3% out. There's a pretty good chance you won't run out of money before you run out of life. The problem is it's a pretty expensive way to mitigate longevity risk. For example, let's say you need $100,000 per year to meet your lifestyle needs in retirement, and you can never take out more than 3% in any given year. Well, how do you figure out how much money you need by day one of retirement to pull that off? Well, you divide 3% in $100,000. That tells you that you need $3.333 million by day one of retirement to fully purge longevity risk from your retirement portfolio. And so that can be a pretty expensive way to manage that particular risk. And so, as I'm sure you've talked about in your books and on your radio show, there's another way, and that's by way of a guaranteed lifetime income annuity. And a guaranteed lifetime income annuity basically says that you can take a chunk of your stock market portfolio, hand it over to an insurance company who will then pool those assets with the assets of lots of other people. And what you will get in exchange for that, in that transaction is you will get a guarantee from the insurance company that they will send you a stream of income that is guaranteed to come to you so long as you're alive. And, the rates that you can get on annuities these days, these are going to ebb and flow with interest rates. But as it turns out, you can completely remove longevity risk in a much more efficient and cost-effective way by way of one of these annuities and trying to manage it on your own through the 3% rule. And so part of the issue that I discussed in the book is there's a lot of the financial services industry that have adopted this, and they recognize longevity risk is a really big deal, and so they utilize annuities as a way to help mitigate longevity risk. The problem is most of the time those annuities get situated within the tax-deferred bucket. And so there's two issues that are associated with positioning your guaranteed lifetime income annuity within your tax-deferred bucket. The first one is, hey, what happens if tax rates go up? If tax rates go up, the after-tax portion of that guaranteed lifetime income starts to go down, which means it may not really be enough to guarantee your lifetime expenses. And the second problem that I bring up in my book is any distributions at all from your tax-deferred bucket, be it from an annuity or an IRA, what have you, count as what we call provisional income, which means they count against the thresholds which cause Social Security taxation. So by positioning a guaranteed lifetime income annuity within your tax-deferred bucket, you unwittingly expose yourself to two issues. One is tax rate risk, which really we want to be able to mitigate against. And then the second one is this idea that your Social Security can be taxed. And the act of compensating for those two holes that are created in your retirement income as a result of rising tax rates and as a result of Social Security taxation can force you to spend down all your other stock market assets a lot faster than you ever thought possible. And so in my book, I talk about how some annuity companies allow you to do what's called a piecemeal internal Roth conversion, which means that over a period of your choosing and an amount of your choosing, you can do you can internally Roth convert that annuity before you draw the guaranteed lifetime income. You can internally convert it to a Roth IRA. And any distributions from Roth IRAs don't count as provisional income, and they're not exposed to tax rate risk. So you can literally mitigate longevity risk, but do it in a very tax efficient way such that all of your assets last a whole lot longer than in that other way that we mentioned.
Amazing. But what about people who say, well, I don't like annuities. Annuities aren't for me. I've heard bad things. You give your money to the insurance company. When you die, high fees, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, well, I talk about this in my book. If you don't like annuities, and remember, what's at the heart of annuities is this idea of risk pooling. You're giving your money to an insurance company. They are pooling it with the assets of thousands of other individuals. And the idea is that the people who live shorter lives help fund the guaranteed lifetime income of those who live longer lives, those who have the Methuselah gene and they're going to live forever. So if you don't like that approach, you almost certainly aren't going to like Social Security, and you almost certainly aren't going to like that company pension that you're planning on receiving, because those two programs both operate by the exact same principle. So what you're doing, in effect, with a guaranteed lifetime income and annuity is you're creating your own personal pension plan that operates by the exact same principles that all of these other programs operate by, these programs that we've grown to know and like, know and love over the years. And so I think that people, once they recognize the rules and the principles by which these programs are governed, that they're principles that we're all familiar with, whether we recognize it or not, I think that they become much more comfortable with the approach.
Fantastic. Now, in your book, The Power of Xero, you first introduced how people, when they're retired, can position their assets in such a way that they could effectively be in a zero tax bracket when they retire. For people who've not read that book, not aware of what you talked about in the book, can you describe that as well? That's an exciting concept.
Yeah, so what I advocate for in The Power of Xero is I basically lay out the evidence that a lot of very smart and important experts that are intimately familiar with the workings of our economy and the debt load that we're carrying, not just now, but in the future, have predicted that tax rates down the road will have to double to keep our country solvent. Well, that's a problem for people who are accustomed to accumulating the lion's share of their wealth in 401ks and IRAs, and that's 95% of the country. Because if you are, in that business partnership with the IRS, and every year they get to vote on what percentage of your profits they get to keep, you don't really know how much money you have, and it's hard to plan for retirement if you don't know how much money you have. And so the idea behind The Power of Xero is let's get our assets situated in the right types of tax-free accounts so that by the time tax rates do rise dramatically over time, we've done all the heavy lifting. We can then take that money out tax-free. And so I typically advocate for 5 or 6 different streams of tax-free income. I love the Roth IRA. I love the Roth 401k. I love the Roth conversion. If by way of the Roth conversion, you can get the balance in your IRA low enough, then required minimum distributions at 72 will be offset by your standard deduction, which means that you can take money out of your IRA actually tax-free. I talk about in chapter 5 of my book something called the LIRP, which is the Life Insurance Retirement Plan, which basically allows you to grow money within a cash value life insurance policy when it's properly structured. It sort of mimics a lot of the tax-free benefits of the Roth IRA without any of the limitations. But the thing, Josh, that makes that LIRP so different than all of those other fantastic streams of tax-free income is that it has a death benefit component that also doubles as long-term care. In other words, should you die, should you need long-term care, they will give you your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for it. So let's say you have a death benefit of $400,000. You wake up one day, you can no longer feed yourself, bathe yourself, transfer yourself, what have you. Find one doctor to write one letter to that effect. They will start sending you 25% of that death benefit, or $100,000 per year, every year for 4 years for the purpose of paying for long-term care. So people don't love traditional long-term care insurance because it's a use it or lose it proposition. You could pay for 30 years, die peacefully in your sleep, never having used it. They won't send you your money back at the end. In this case, if you die peaceful in your sleep, never having needed long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you never have to use. So that can be a very heartburn-free way of mitigating long-term care. I talk about that a lot in my book, The Volatility Shield. And then finally, if you can keep your provisional income levels low enough through proper management, then your Social Security can be tax-free. And if you have 6 streams of tax-free income, Josh, and none of them show up on the IRS's radar, but all of them contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket, that's a pretty effective way to mitigate against rising tax rates.
What tips do you have for the estate tax threshold and life insurance?
Yeah, so as of right now, current law is you get a pretty massive estate tax exemption, on the order of $23 million, which means that very, very few Americans are going to be exposed to estate tax. I know that Joe Biden has discussed lowering that to 3.5 million per person or $7 million a couple. And remember, it's not whether you have 7 million today. It's whether you're going to have 7 million when you die, say 15 or 20 years from now. So you really got to do some math. You got to sort of project out over the next, the balance of your life expectancy and say, if Joe Biden gets his way and $7 million becomes that new estate tax exemption threshold, will you be above or below that amount by the time you die? And then you have to sort of make some strategic planning decisions accordingly. But certainly, you can talk about the ILIT, the irrevocable life insurance trust, which allows you to gift money to a trust, the beneficiaries of which are your children, and that money can grow outside of your estate. So in essence, you're saying, look, I know my estate's going to grow over time. I want that growth to take place in a trust, the beneficiary of which is my children, so that I never get to the point where my estate comes even close to that threshold. And then if you do breach that threshold, then of course the money that's in that trust can help pay whatever estate tax you have down the road.
Thank you, David McKnight, author of Income for Life, Tax-Free Income for Life, which is your free gift when you schedule and keep your no obligation review. Give us a call, 888-988-JOSH, or check out davidmcknight.com. We'll be back after this with any of your questions at 800-321-0710. That's 800-321-0710. If you want to get on live with us, or type into the YouTube chat box your question. We are on YouTube live. Just search for The Financial Quarterback, and you will see our live show, and you get to type in any question on the chat box. We'll be back after these messages.
Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback here. In these uncertain financial times, it is imperative that you guard your financial future. If you call within the next 3 minutes, we will offer our complimentary bear market survival guide, which will detail steps to help your plan to potentially survive the COVID-19 crisis. The bear market survival guide will cover how you might still be able to retire amid a volatile economic climate. We will throw in our complimentary 27-point ultimate game plan for retirement. Call us at 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674 for your bear market survival guide.
Call Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-JOSH. It's always on your mind. Retirement, whether you're 55 or 35. Not everyone wants to work forever, and most would like a comfortable retirement. You may already have a plan, but is it the right one? Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program, is ready to guide you towards financial freedom. He challenges the ways your parents and grandparents saved money with fresh strategies, which are exactly what you need to navigate today's volatile economic climate. Josh's new book, Retirement Reality Check, is available to order on Amazon. It's an easy read that guides you through his system for securing your financial freedom, including tax-saving strategies, understanding the right investment mix, and more. Order now. Retirement Reality Check. Call Josh at 888-988-JOSH. Let Josh help you map out your retirement using fresh strategies. Call 888-988-5674. That's 888-988-5674.
Kids, what is the age range? Mine's 0 to 13.
Yeah, I've got a similar range. I've got my youngest is 6 and my oldest is 20. So about a 14-year span there. And so we're about, we had children about every 2 years. We sort of like an assembly line. We just got to the point where my wife said, you know what, I think our family is complete.
That's fun. Yeah, we love having a lot of kids. It's fun. Although the 7th is the Power of Xero, the power of the 7th. The 7th begins to be a little overwhelming. We could handle 5 and 6 easily, but the 7th, well, he was in the hospital for 2 months, so.
Right.
And then baby Billy, he's 2. And we never had a kid, with the, not the terrible 2s, but he gives us a handful. So he's a handful of blessings.
I'll tell you this. I don't know what the makeup is. We've got a 15-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl, and they are absolutely terrific, and they are like my wife's eyes and ears and helping hands. And it really, as the older ones get older and they sort of move into that role of being able to make sure the house doesn't burn down and there's not too much chaos prevailing in the household, it gets easier, believe it or not, because it doesn't, the onus doesn't fall just on the two parents. You get other people that start to chip in.
Oh yeah, we have we're blessed by having two girls up front. So our two oldest are girls. So there's something about having the two girls up front that's easy. That makes it a little easier. The five boys are complete chaos. It's like a WWF match every night. It's fun.
Yeah, so I've got two girls and five boys, just like you. It's just the order's just a tiny bit different.
Yeah, it's insane. We'll clean the house, and then literally within an hour, the whole house gets messed up, and it's so much.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. You know what the most offensive? What is the most offensive thing you've ever heard as the father of seven? Because I'm sure you get a lot of the same questions, like, "Are they all yours?" Stuff like that. I'm like, no, they're the mailman's. No.
Yeah, I get from how many different mothers. I get that quite a bit, and they're just shocked to their core when I say one.
Yeah, me too.
You hear overpopulation quips.
Yeah.
You have 7 carbon footprints, and I'll say, hey, look, we have 7 kids, but who do you think is going to pay for your Social Security? And so people want to be able to have their Social Security, but they also want to be able to not have a lot of people on the planet, but you can't have both.
Well, I must travel in the right circles. I don't really hear the carbon footprint one. I think if somebody told me that one, I'd punch them in the face.
Yeah.
No, I do know that's like a thing now that's more, prevalent, but I guess we live in a more conservative area in New Jersey, and my clients really, and it's funny. I think the carbon footprint language is one of these like white privilege things, because then I have a Tesla, and I've thought about this more than anyone. If everyone has an electric vehicle, our carbon footprint as a country is going to be a disaster because there's not enough nuclear to fuel the electric vehicles. But anyway, it's fun. Any tips, because you've been a little bit of a father of 7 for a little longer than me. What's your number one tip? You seem like a good dad.
Well, my number one tip is this too shall pass. You've got to remember to stop and smell the roses along the way. It's so easy to just get so mired down in the chaos that is exploding all around you all the time, because there's no two ways about it. Mitt Romney talked about this during his presidential run. He said with his 5 kids, it was chaos in his house all the time. And you just got to remember to just not get too out of sorts about it and stop and smell the roses along the way, because I've had so many people tell me that you blink and you miss it. So if you spend all your time sort of bemoaning how hard it is, you're going to miss a lot of those really thrilling vistas along the way. And so just have that long-term perspective and know that these are precious moments that are going to pass us by, and we just have to learn to enjoy it, notwithstanding the chaos that's fomenting all about us.
Yeah, the good thing is I can handle chaos. I love it. It's having a lot of kids is a joy, and it's really fun. And people say, I love when people say, "Are your hands full?" Yes, full of blessings. So when we return, we'll be back with concluding thoughts with David McKnight on your money, the prospect of higher taxes, and what you can do to protect yourself. When we return, this is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial.
Hey, meet you out on the first tee?
Yeah, I'll be right there. Just reading this article.
On what?
New bill Congress passed. Looks like it's going to affect the value of all retirement savings plans. My financial guy didn't tell me about this when I saw him the other day.
Well, my guy did, and we made a plan. You may have heard of him, Josh Jalinski.
Josh Jalinski is your guy?
Listen, if you're 10 years or less from retirement,
Which I am.
Josh will give you a free economic plan, which includes retirement planning, a 27-point checklist to make sure your income lasts as long as you live. He'll even help you navigate the current tax code.
I'm definitely going to call Josh.
Cool, but first, can we play some golf?
Call Josh Jalinski, host of the popular Financial Quarterback radio program, for your free economic plan. 888-988-JOSH. 888-988-JOSH. 888-988-JOSH.
Okay, we're back. This is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight of the Power of Xero. So, concluding thoughts on how to protect yourself from rising taxes. You mentioned life insurance. You wrote a book called Look Before You Lerp. Not every life insurance policy is the same, and it's not like you just want to go out to your neighborhood and buy life insurance from your old friend who you golf with. What are some principles for constructing the proper life insurance plan, and what do you say to people who are kind of down on life insurance?
Well, what the premise of that book is that starting a life insurance policy is a bit like getting married. It only really works if it's till death do you part. Life insurance, the way the tax law works with the life insurance policy is you experience this tax-free buildup of wealth internal to the policy, and you have to make sure that there's at least $1 in that cash value when you die, or all of the taxes that you got out of along the way, you get to pay tax on all in 1 year if it's not managed properly. And so I tell people it's a long-term proposition. There's a lot of benefits that accrue to you along the way, but you have to make sure that if it's like that till death do you part, that you approach it in the same way that you might a marriage. And people don't like to admit this, Josh, but I ask rooms full of people, how many of you guys had a laundry list of things you were looking for in a spouse? And nobody likes to admit it, but they know that deep down inside, they had things they were looking for in a spouse. You know, you want to be heading in the right direction. Maybe you religiously, you want to be on the same page. Maybe you have the same interests, what have you. You need to have a laundry list of things that you're looking for in a life insurance retirement plan, because if you are missing any of those 7 or 8 things I discuss in the book, it's like a ticking time bomb, and it's going to sneak up on you and sort of scramble your whole strategy when you least expect it. So there's a couple of things. We want the money to grow safely, productively. If you can get 6% net after fees without taking any more risk than what you're accustomed to taking in your savings account, that's a pretty safe and productive way to grow at least a portion of your money. I talk about having what's called a chronic illness rider, which means that you have the ability to access your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. For the people, my clients between ages of 50 and 65, 75% of the reason why they get the LIRP is because of that long-term care benefit. You want to be very, very selective and cognizant of what the loan provisions are within the policy. I advocate for what's called a guaranteed 0% loan, and there's some details that go into explaining why that's important, but the idea is that you want your loan to be tax-free and cost-free. So there's just a number of those things that can really sink your ship if you enter into these contracts and you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. So that look before you lerp is obviously a play on the phrase look before you leap. Before you get married, you want to look before you leap. Before you start a life insurance policy, you want to look before you lerp. And so the basic idea is that these are long-term contracts. They have long-term implications. You just want to make sure that before you get into them, you check all of the boxes before you sign up for a long-term proposition.
So Look Before You Lerp, you can get that on Amazon or wherever books are sold. A final question from the audience. What's the prognosis of raising the age for RMDs again?
Yeah, so that comes back to the Secure Retirement Act 2.0, which is sort of working its way through Congress right now. They've talked about raising that to age 75 from 72. There's actually also sort of a transition period for people where some people can access it at 73, some 74, some 75, or be forced to take the RMDs. But the thing that we have to remember is that RMDs only affect like 20% of Americans. And the reason is most people are going to be accessing in excess of their RMDs each and every year. So saying, hey, look, you don't have to access this money prior to age 75 is not going to affect a lot of people because they're already going to be accessing that money prior to 75.
And final question, Secure Act. What are people doing in light of the death of the Secure Act? The Secure Act died, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, so people forgot that the Secure Act passed. Anything you're telling people in light of the Secure Act?
Yeah, so the death of the Roth, the stretch IRA was a really, really big deal. And so what I tell people is that so that's gone, which means your kids are going to inherit your Roth IRA and be forced to take it as income over 10 years. So what I say is, hey, if you convert your money from an IRA to a Roth IRA today, you can do so at historically low tax rates. So your kids won't have to pay the tax at their higher tax rates on top of all their income at a period in time when tax rates are likely to be higher than they are today. So even if you think your tax rate is a bit higher, it may still be lower than your kids' tax rates, in which case you should strongly think about doing Roth conversions today.
Wonderful. David McKnight, davidmcknight.com, and anything you want to plug before we conclude the interview.
Just keep your ear to the ground for my new book, The Infinity Code. And if they want to buy any of my books in bulk or single copy at Amazon in bulk at davidmcknightbooks.com.
davidmcknightbooks.com. And folks, give us a call, 888-988-JOSH, and I'll give you any of David's books free when you schedule and keep your no-obligation 27-point ultimate financial game plan. Call us now, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674. We'll be back after these messages with your questions at 800-321-0710. This is Josh Jalinski. Call us now, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674.
WOR and WAXQ HD2 New York, an iHeart radio station. Available everywhere on our free iHeartRadio app. Number one for music, radio, and podcasts.
John Batchelor has a new radio home. Hear John weeknights from 9 to midnight, starting Monday on 710 WOR, the voice of New York.
An iHeart radio station.
57 degrees at 10 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Paul DeCastro. A young boy was killed and his grandmother is critically injured after an apartment fire in Manhattan. Police responded to the building at 660 170